But essentially, they had AI tools where, once you upload the list, you can automatically send text to these agents. So I was doing that for, I want to say, about 2 months. And it took maybe about 2 to 2.5 weeks before I started to see some traction, where I want to say, like, on a daily basis, I was getting at least, 3 to 5 agents that are like reaching back out to me saying, hey, look at this property. Maybe there's something here. So I started to get a little traction with potential opportunities. This is the first time where I'm experiencing, oh, like now I can, like, every day look at like actual properties and see if there's actual deals to do something. I ended up finding this property. This was out in Texas, and no, it was in Georgia. It was in Atlanta. And not mind you, I'm still kind of fresh in this. So I find this property. This agent calls. She says, "Hey, look, my mom is trying to sell this property, and she hasn't been able to sell it on the market, because it still needs to be fixed up. See if you want to make an offer on it." And the property needed some work, but she still had a mortgage on it. So a lot of the investors that were already making offers on it were kind of lowballed. At this time, I was learning about creative finance, something that we're going to be talking about, but creative finance, where you can, find creative strategies to buy property versus wholesale. So, I talked to the lady's mother, and we kind of came to a consensus on something that might make sense. Now, mind you, I'm in Colombia at this point, so I can't go to the property and kind of sit there face to face, bring a contract, and put the deal together. So I reached out to somebody that I was connected with in a real estate community, and I was like, "Hey, look, man, I got this property that I'm trying to close. I need somebody, boots on the ground that can help me with it." Boom. I have him go to the property and talk to the person. Now, after he went to that property, when I tell you, the seller never picked up their phone again. When I called them, that was my first experience of, like, oh, shit is not all rainbows and roses. Like, it's real. It can get real cutthroat out there. Like, this game is not how you see it on YouTube. You think it's all nice and dandy. Oh, okay, I just find the sellers and then lock them up and then I get the deal moved. Nah, it wasn't that simple. I had several deals that I believe were snaked from me, and that was a part of my learning process. So I had two deals I went to the same guy with. I don't know why I went back to him, but I trusted the guy, and those deals ended up falling through. That was like about a year and a half in. Eventually, I ended up moving back to the U.S., and I said, okay, we're going to take another shot at this. So the next strategy that I used was pay per leads, where essentially you find a company that already kind of has systems in place that are finding their own leads, and you just pay them directly and say, okay, I want to talk to these sellers directly by just paying you for the leads. And at this stage, I was kind of a little bit more knowledgeable, you know what I'm saying? I had a couple of bruises, so now I know, okay, I can do this and I don't need to, like, trust everybody. So I was still doing this on my own. This next property was in Texas. It's a place called Edgewood. It's about, probably about 15, 20 miles east of DFW. And this property, the lady, she inherited it from her mother, and she wanted to sell the property, and this was a good deal. The property was roughly, so after repairs, is going to be somewhere around like 300, 312, and I locked up the deal at 100. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, there's a lot of room in there. I can make a good number on it. And this was like my next lesson, where it's, you got to understand how to underwrite deals, because if you don't know how to underwrite deals, people are going to take advantage of you. And that's what happened on my first deal. So I eventually, when I got the deal locked up, my next process was, okay, how do I find a buyer? Never gone through that, you know. I didn't really watch too many videos on how to find a buyer, because the whole time I'm trying to figure out how to find the deal, how to lock up the deal, how learning about sales, how to talk to the seller, all these kinds of things. So you finally get there and you're like, okay, what's next? So now I'm scrambling. I locked up this deal, and there's a certain window you have. Typically, when you lock up a contract, you have about 3 or 4 weeks to find a buyer. or the contract expires. So I'm on Google. I'm Googling buyers in Texas, buyers in Dallas, calling all kinds of like wholesaling numbers to see if I can find a buyer. So I find this guy, and he's like, "Oh." I told him the address. He's like, "Oh yeah, I know that address. I have a property like down the street from there." I was like, "Yes," and he actually sent me the property. I looked it up on Property Search. Okay, boom. He looks legit. So he says he wants to go look at the property. I sent him out there. At the time, the lady, the owner, her son, quote unquote, her son, was living at the property. So when he went out there, he started talking to the guy. Now, mind you, I wasn't there. I had no way of like being able to show up because I was at the time on the East Coast and this guy was in Texas. So he went to go talk to the guy, and now mind you, he called me when he was at the property, and I could hear them kind of talking in the background. He's like, "Yeah, so like, how long you had the property, and like, what are you guys selling it for?" Like, he's basically trying to get all the information of what they're getting out of the deal, what they're getting out of the property, and like, I didn't hear everything clearly, but I had an idea. Like, okay, he's trying to ask questions to see what he wants to offer to me. Now, most investors, they want to be somewhere at 70% of the market value, minus repairs. So I had a contractor go out there. Actually, no, I didn't have a contractor go out there. That is another mistake that I made, where I didn't have a contractor go out there to actually figure out what the actual repair cost would be. That way I had more of a way to negotiate the price. So I didn't have a contractor go out there. So I had just a rough estimate of how much the repairs would cost, but how would I know that when I just had some pictures and I wasn't actually there? So the guy goes there, he looks at the property, he comes back and he says, "Man, there's so much that needs to be done. Like, we got to do this, we got to do that." I know he's overselling it. You know what I mean? He's trying to get a good price on the property. So he's telling me, "Yeah, we got to do this, we got to do that." So I can offer like 175. I'm like, "Nah, bro. Like, if we do the numbers, I know that we can sell this property probably at 140, 130, 140. Because the repairs, the square footage of the house wasn't that much. I want to say it was like 1350, something around there. So the repairs weren't going to cost that much. But anyway, it was my first deal. I was kind of like out in the ocean. I just wanted to lock this one up, get it done. So I didn't really have that much negotiation power. So he's telling me, "All right, 175." I try to negotiate back. I say, "Yeah, man. I looked at the market. 150 makes sense. And he's like, "All right, well, I don't know. We'll see." And then he says, "All right, yeah, if you can find somebody else, cool. But we'll see." Here's another thing: if you don't have buyers lined up, and this is another thing that I learned, if you don't have multiple buyers lined up, then you most likely will concede on the price that you're looking for because you don't have the negotiation power. Like, if that buyer was really my only lifeline, and because I was lucky enough to find him, I felt a little pressure to get the deal sold. So it was my first deal, first time finding a buyer. Didn't have any other buyers. A lot of pressure. I kind of caved. I caved, and I was like, I called him probably the next day, and I was like, "Look, man, uh, can you do 160?" He's like, "Nah, it looks like we can only do 175, you know." And I just folded after that. I said, "All right, cool, man. Let's just do 175." Actually, wait, I'm saying 175. No, it was let's do 125. Yeah, I wish it was 175. That's what I wanted, but it was 125. So I locked up the property at 100. I sold it to him for 125. So it was supposed to be a $25,000 profit. Check this out. Once we started going through the paperwork of going through the title company, come to find out, the lady had arrears on the property. Now, I knew about the arrears, but because I'm new to this, I didn't communicate those arrears to the buyer. So now the buyer calls me. He's like, "Hey, bro, there's $7,500 arrears on the property. What's going on with that? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. I considered that, the arrears are going to be a part of you buying the property, right? That makes sense. Like if you're buying the property, then you're taking responsibility of the arrears and everything like that. And he was like, well, no, you didn't tell me about the arrears. So we calculated the prices and everything based off of the property being free and clear. So now I'm still at a disadvantage for this property because I didn't relay to him that there was arrears. So we tacked off 7,500 because I wanted to get the deal done. We were kind of arguing about it, and I said, you know what? Let me not mess this up. Let's get the deal done. So we took off 7,500, and turned out to be about a $17,500 deal. Boom, we got that. We got that locked in, and man, the whole process, when I tell you, it was crazy. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. The lady had to go through probate because she inherited it. So when the deal was supposed to take like 2 3 weeks, it ended up taking almost 3 months, and it was crazy.
What are arrears?
No, that's cool. But arrears are like, things that are owed on the property, like tax liens or anything that is owed on the property. Yeah, I know. I probably gonna have to talk more like a fifth grader trying to talk shit, right?
Bro.
I swear. But we'll get there. So yeah, what would I do differently, man? If I could do it all over again, I think I definitely would find someone, a mentor, who is already doing what I was doing, vet him, make sure he's legit, and do my best to really connect with him and expedite that process because, I did the whole thing kind of solo dolo. And when you're doing it solo dolo, there are so many pitfalls that you can, go through. There's so many things that you may think everything is going well, and all it takes is for one thing to kind of take everything off kilt. And man, if I had somebody in my corner that I could just say, hey, look, just do this, 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 and this, call these people, have this person go out and check the property, da 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 da, and everything lined up, just like how I know it now, man, it would have saved me so much stress. It would have saved me so much time, and I would have made more money on the property. So, you know, another reason why I'm making this video is that, and the reason I'm telling you this story is that you may be going through the process of trying to lock in your first deal, and you're watching these YouTube videos and you're trying to figure out how to do this. And I would say, the best thing that you could do for yourself, more than any video that you can watch, is truly to find somebody that is following in the footsteps that you want to follow and learn from them, but like actually build a connection with that person, talk to the person, and let them help you through the steps that you need to take in order to get your first deal. Because the reality is, like, I am not that far ahead of you of where you want to go. But that's the beauty of it, is that I'm not a guru. I'm not somebody who knows it all, but I'm somebody who's in the trenches just like you are. And if this is something that you're serious about and you want to see results, you need to build a community. You need to connect with people, because a lot of times it's not easy doing it on your own. So I say all this to say, if this is something you're serious about, it's going to be linked down in the description where you can connect with me. If you want to have a call, we can talk about where you're going, where you want to go. I want this to be raw. I want this to be something that is not just an educational video on YouTube. It's something where you can genuinely make connections and make things happen. So if you like this content and you like what you're hearing, go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Let's connect, let's communicate, and I hope you guys have a good day. Ciao.